Hello, everybody. This is the Monday Night Pod. Tyler Fensky. We're going to be continuing our series out of Psalm 54, just the circumstances that David was going through there. This week, we're going to be focusing on the friendship between David and Jonathan.
Yeah, Psalm 54, if you were with us last week, that's referencing David being, hiding from the Ziphites. And that's the last time that he meets up with Jonathan. That's the last time he sees Jonathan. And, obviously that's a well-known friendship. It's just David and Jonathan. And that's what we looked at tonight at Bible study, was that just aspect of friendship. Interesting recent study that they did on Gen Z, calling it the quote, the loneliest generation, because 80% of Gen Z men said in this most recent study that they often feel lonely and have few or no close friends. That was 80%. So this has become a real problem, just society-wise, is friendship, especially amongst men. It's a little more pronounced in men than women. It's a problem across the board, but it's more with men than women, where we're just having trouble with friendship. And we talked tonight about, there's a lot of problems that come about with that, because we're born for community. We're born for just interaction and friendship. We know that even from Genesis, where the Lord says, it's not good for the man to be alone. And with people just struggling with friendship out there, we thought this would be just a really good time to talk about David and Jonathan and just what that ideal friendship looks like. And before we even get into that, as we noted tonight, one of the things about friendship is not just a natural thing with humans, that's important in terms of friendship, in terms of community and not being isolated and feeling lonely. We know all that's important, but we also know just spiritually just the importance of unity, where the Holy Spirit has made some promises based on your ability to just interact with people. Looking at Psalm 133, how good and pleasant it is when brothers live together in unity. It's like precious oil poured on the head, running down the beard, running down on Aaron's beard, down upon the collar of his robes. It is as if the dew of Hermon were falling on Mount Zion. From there the Lord bestows his blessing, even life evermore. So the oil flows based on connectivity. And if you break the connectivity, you stop the flow. And if you stop the flow, you lose the blessing. So we know that it's an important thing spiritually as well, that we're in unity as believers, and there's that connectivity. So that's what we want to look at tonight, is friendship, and looking at it from the aspect of David and Jonathan.
Yeah, and understanding that, the Lord gave us the two greatest commandments, to love the Lord as you love yourself, but also to love others as you love yourself. And so much of what the Lord has for us and what he wants to do for us is through other people, right? And so if you want to be the ultimate version of you, if you want to live the life ultimately, to the full that the Lord has for you, it's going to be in connection with other people along the way. There's only so much that you can accomplish on your own, do on your own, but also become just on your own. And oftentimes that level up and that just, open doors is through other people. And the Lord wants that for us. We're not made to be alone. The Lord himself isn't alone. There's so much value that comes from community. And, in my opinion, it's like friendships are breaking down in general in our society. And a lot of that has to do with the phone and just lack of interaction, specifically more between men, because men I think in just the way women are wired, they're more communal to begin with. They enjoy, it doesn't take much for them to become friends. For men, it's really like, we got to be striving for something together. We got to be doing something together. It's often through activities that men form bonds, and, with the invention of the iPhone, it's like, people are just doing less things in general. It's not as fun to just go out and do things anymore or strive for things, because real life isn't as fun as the dopamine release from the iPhone. And I think that causes great breakdown in just, interactions between people, but more so for men just because of how we're wired. And that's trickled down even into the church, to where it's like, that should be the strongest unity. That should be the strongest bond we have in society. And for a while there, it was. And society in America benefited greatly because of that. There's everything revolved around what is your local church doing, and the bond there and the unity there was so tight. Now that's just completely broken, and there's way less authority, and we're seeing a lot of bad side effects because of that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you bring up a couple good points there. I heard that recently of a guy who, that's what he's, quote unquote expert in is just relationships. And he was saying that he feels like some of the breakdown in male friendship is because he sees it as a lot of times in just the couple dynamic. It's the woman who is doing the planning in terms of here's what we're going to do this weekend, so on amongst couples. And just because you're seeing less relationships and family structure and the birth rate is down and all that, he thinks that that's one of the things that's also affecting male friendship. Because it's just you're getting less of the women planning it, just because of what's going on just relationally as well. But what you spoke to there, 100% true. It's just the society's become just much more fractured than it used to be, and we're all kind of in our own little, in our own little worlds on the phone. A lot of people statistically have retreated into a cocoon of gaming and Reddit and all the above. And there are less opportunities for people to just be able to meet other people.
Yeah.
So you're 100% right about that.
Yeah, and like you said, it's pretty well known, the relationship that David and Jonathan had, as you pointed to tonight. And I think, like we talked about tonight, there's a lot of insight that we can get into friendship from them, but also understand that there's a lot, if we miss out on this aspect of life, we're missing out on a lot of life, and we're missing out on what a blessing friendship could be. And I think they are the example of that. And where we got this from, a good chunk of it came from 1 Samuel 18.
Yeah. In the overarching thing that we're looking at is why this is so important. We're not talking about just societal trends, but also just the spiritual, like you spoke to, right? The first commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second commandment is like it, as Jesus says in Mark 12, love your neighbor as yourself. So we know that we love us. We don't have a problem loving us. We're all naturally very self-centered and selfish. It's now, can you love others as you love yourself? And we know that by this, all men will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So this is a really important part of the faith. And 1 John tells you that if you cannot love your brother whom you can see, then you cannot love God whom you have not seen. So this is a really, really important thing, not just as how we're built as human beings, but also just spiritually. And David and Jonathan, are a really great example of this. We had 5 quick points about this, of what we can learn from their friendship. The first one is just a match. So we're in 1 Samuel 18 here. It says, after David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. Now, an important point to note here is that David had been in the palace prior to this. The reason he got in was because of his musical giftings, right? Saul's being harassed by this evil spirit. David would play the harp, and then it would provide relief. So that's how he initially got in the palace. So he would have been around Jonathan, but no friendship formed. And that's because I think your basis for friendship is that there has to be a match. You have to see your soul's counterpart in somebody else. You're on the same track. You're on the same trajectory. And what had just happened here was David had just killed Goliath. And Jonathan had such a similar experience that a lot of people know less about. If you just go back just a few pages to 1 Samuel 14, where the Philistines had assembled their forces, and the response out of Israel is just pure fear. So Saul summons the army. Nobody's showing up. The existing standing force is, quote, quaking with fear, 1 Samuel 13. And there's a major desertion problem going on, so to the point that Saul's just left with only 600 troops. And it's in that context, when everybody is fearful and literally hiding and on the run and deserting, that Jonathan says, who are these uncircumcised Philistines? Climbs up the side of a cliff with his hands and feet and kills 20 Philistines in the area of a half an acre with just him and his armor bearer, and takes them on and kills 20 dudes. And out of that was then panic struck the whole army, those in the camp, in the field, and those on the outposts and raiding parties, and the ground shook. It was a panic sent by God, and this brought about this great victory then for Israel, because Jonathan was the one that in this just, fear that was going on, he was the one that stood up and said, who are these guys? And went and fought them. And we know the story of David Goliath, where Goliath, 9'6", and this champion, the Philistines' hero, will come out and shout his usual defiance, and did that for 40 days. And it says that the Israelite army fled from him in great fear. Up until the day that David shows up, and it says, and David heard it. And David's response is just like Jonathan, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he would defy the armies of the living God? And David goes out and kills him, and that leads to a great victory. So almost identical experiences that they both had, where everybody else was responding in fear, and they responded in a completely different way of saying, who is this? Who are they to be doing this? And they take on the Philistines and bring about a great victory. So that's really where the friendship then sparked, was that it was, them seeing like in one another.
Yeah, becoming one in spirit.
Exactly.
Right, and David had to earn that, because like you said, David had been around the palace before that. He became the type of man that Jonathan would be friends with, right? So in understanding that, friendship goes both ways,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to see it in each other, right? And so while
not a one-sided thing.
Exactly, and too many people make it a one-sided thing, which it's just not friendship, but that's where we see it with David and Jonathan. It's like he can see, well, that's an admirable trait, right? I don't fear men. I fear the Lord. I trust in the Lord. I have courage, right? We can all say that's an admirable thing. Oh, I would strive to be like that. Once you become that,
right,
all of a sudden there can be reciprocity. You can be one in spirit, as it says.
Yeah, and the key takeaway out of that first point is just, stop trying to be friends with people who are not on the same trajectory as you.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
Yeah, right. Be selective in your friendship. You shouldn't be trying to be friends with everybody. You can be acquaintances and friendly and kind with many people, of course. Right, but we're talking about real friendship here. We're going beyond the superficial level. That's what we're talking about tonight, of a deep friendship where, as it says, Jonathan became one in spirit, and he loved him as himself. That's the same word that you see in Genesis when it talks about Israel, his life being closely bound up with Benjamin, right? So this is a deep friendship here, a deep love, and it starts with just a match. So that's the first point. And the second thing here is you see this covenant. So verse 2, from that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return to his father's house. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. So you're seeing, we don't do this culturally anymore, but you're seeing this covenant here where there's like, they're outright saying, I am for you, right? I'm with you. There's loyalty to this. There's steadfastness to this. That verse 2, if you just read through it, you might think that's disconnected. I think that's 100% connected, because before, David's going back and forth from Bethlehem to the palace, right back and forth. And from that day forward, now he's here. Once he's there, it's like now you can have that friendship, because you have to have availability. There's no friendship if somebody's not available. That you have to be, they have to be available. They have to be there. There has to be loyalty and steadfastness. Is this somebody that would stick with me when the chips are down? Is this somebody who's going to be around, period? Right? That's an important aspect of friendship, that plays in this covenant.
Yeah, there's so much trust that gets built up when you have that steadfastness, right? When you know that they're concrete, they'll be there for you. There's so much trust that's built over time as well.
Yeah.
The time of just putting in time together, which gives opportunity for the things to come, but the time that you spend brings closeness. It also builds trust, to be steadfast and to know and have security in someone, to know that, they're going to be there, right? And they prove that by sticking there. That has to be proven, and it takes time to prove that. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't prove a covenant. You can't prove that you're going to be steadfast with someone if time doesn't go by. You don't prove that in a day. You don't prove that by sticking by in a day. It's tested over periods of time, and naturally it just grows from there. It's something that naturally has to happen. Right? You can't rush it. You can't force it. It happens.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's like some of these things, it's like, there has to be some intentionality behind it.
Yeah.
Because if you just kind of leave life as just kind of, here we go, it's like there has to be that aspect of friendship. Is there's going to be that time investment. You're going to have to make time for each other. If you want something to grow.
But that's the side of commitment that comes with true friendship. that commitment of time in and of itself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's and and you see this covenant, it really does play with the match as well. It's like, because it says after he had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him himself. It's like this like pivot here where it's like they see this likeness in one another, and it's like now we're gonna add some just concreteness and validity to this, where now we have this like covenant, and this was more than one time too. There was multiple covenants that David and Jonathan made together where they were just affirming their friendship and covenant with one another. Multiple times where they were taking. I mean, you can see that throughout, but it's like when David's on the run in 1 Samuel 20, right? Jonathan has him reaffirm that. They do that again then in 23, where they're talking about just the future, the last time that they meet together, which we're going to talk about next week, right? They made another covenant there. So this is something that happens throughout, right? The covenant. So the first thing, match, and then a covenant. And then we also talked tonight about just the aspect of giving, because you see here in verse 4, Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt.
Yeah, so there's always going to be an attachment between what you feel internally to what happens externally, right? So if you feel love for someone internally, that's going to be professed externally through things like giving. And we literally see the sequence there. It's like, okay, you see the match, you make the covenant, you're committed to time with him. From there, just out of the overflow of his heart, it's like, okay, I'll take off the shirt off my back. I'll give you the robe I'm wearing and bring it to you. It doesn't have to be the biggest gift in the world, could even be the smallest gift in the world. It's going to be something. When there's love there and there's friendship there, it's going to be something on some level that shows I love you, and therefore I have no problem giving to you, no matter how big or small it is. Yeah,
that's a good point about it too. It's not some kind of like extravagant gift necessarily. It's something just thoughtful. If you look at this context here, where you get robe, tunic, sword, bow, and belt. I mean, you flip back, they had a real weapons problem going on in Israel at this time, where they're going into this prior battle where it says the only ones who had sword or spear in his hand was Saul and Jonathan, because of how the Philistines were choking them economically with just getting weapons sharpened. So, I mean, this was a big gift that he gave him here. But yeah, it's like, whether it's big or small, it's like love will always find something to give. Yeah. And if somebody says they love you and they never give you anything, be suspicious, right? Okay. So that aspect of giving, and then the fourth point here, we talked about just sharing information, right? Where you see throughout Jonathan and David, they're constantly just sharing information with another. And that might seem like an obvious thing, but that's an important distinction in friendship. You look at John 15, when Jesus talks about this, he says, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. So the distinction there between somebody who would just be an employee or somebody who would be an acquaintance and a friend is the information that you're sharing with them. Right? And we even do that formally, right? We're going to go out to lunch and catch up.
Yeah.
Right? You haven't heard from a friend in a while. Let me call you, and we're going to catch up. And it's just, okay, we're sharing information about what's going on in each other's life.
Yeah.
And that seems obvious, but you will get a dynamic where people will put up walls around them where they will not share anything with anyone, and that confines them to just shallow, superficial relationships, because they won't share anything with anybody else. And for that reason, no friendship can grow in their life, because they're so guarded with these things. And like we talked about tonight, that's just a reflection of pride. We didn't go deep into this tonight, but you look at humility, and that's a verse that I love in the Bible, because a lot of people just do not understand that. But when you look at humility, you see the exact example that is in Numbers 12, where Miriam and Aaron begin to talk against Moses. And then it says, now Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. And if you don't understand the word of God or you don't have insight, you're like, oh, Moses wrote this himself and he's saying he's humble. That's not very humble. It's the definition of humble because they're talking about him and he does not respond to that. Mm-hmm. That's a good test for what your pride is versus humility, is that you can take criticism and are you trying to always, no, you're barking back, or can you just take that, right? So there's that aspect of humility. Now, when it comes to just friendship and sharing information, when you're getting too prideful, it's not that it's like criticism, but it's the same type of reaction where when there's that pride aspect, you essentially just don't want to deal with any possible like pushback or possible criticism or a reaction that you might not like. Mm-hmm. So that pride is what keeps you in a prison of you won't share anything with anyone. Yeah. And we're not talking like you're going around sharing big secrets. It would just be like, here's common conversation. Like the example I gave tonight, here's a kid who I've trained for years. He's moved to Utah. He was back this week in Vegas visiting his parents. Came in the facility, and it was about, we're just sitting there for about 20 minutes, and I'm just asking him questions. Yeah. Catching up. Yeah. Right? How is, because I wasn't able to go to his wedding. How was your wedding? How's the marriage been so far? When are you guys, thinking about starting a family? How's work going? Mm-hmm. How's things developing with, we talked about just his career and all the things that you would do to just catch up. Yeah. Right. But you will have some people that just, they're encased in those four walls because of that pride, and they won't share anything with anyone. And that literally inhibits friendship. Friendship cannot form because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a quick point to add to the point you made about Moses. Jesus gives us this example in humility. This is when he's before the Sanhedrin in Mark 14. It says the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is the testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Just another aspect of humility there. Do you feel like you have to defend yourself? Something that goes unsaid, and this is just a basic point of how to win friends and influence people, is it assumes the fact that you're interested in others, right? Mm-hmm. The sharing of information, the back and forth, to be a friend, you have to genuinely be interested in how's marriage been? How's career been? How's this been? How's that been? And it goes both ways from there, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people, I think, just aren't interested in others because of the lack of love for others. Because if you love me, you're genuinely going to be interested in how is life going? Mm-hmm. How are these things for you? What's going on, right? You would want to know these things, right? And so if we love our brothers, like the word says that we ought to, and if you're a believer, it's like you ought to have a genuine curiosity or interest in others and in their well-being, in what's going on in their life. How are you doing? Right. Following up with them. How's this? How's that? Mm-hmm. That's just, like you said, it seems natural, but I think our generation is so far removed from natural, interactions.
Well, because, sometimes when it should be, here's just the conversation going on, everybody's looking at their phone. Yeah.
So little conversations actually being had.
Right. Yeah. It's everybody's like looking down, or they're even mid-conversation, they're reaching for the phone. One study showed that even just the presence of the phone. Yeah.
It could even just be on the table. That takes away.
Right. That already is taking away from conversation. The other person is already seeing that as a distraction, that they're maybe not fully listening to me. So it's like you, in today's day and age, you have things entering just the normal human dynamic we didn't have in any other century that's really inhibiting these things, But, what you're looking at there specifically is you got somebody who, you got opportunities for friendship. And people are asking, but they've, maybe given up asking because you won't share anything with anyone.
Yeah, true.
Right? So it's like...
It's give a little, take a little. There's got to be give and take there. Right. That's the only way you can build trust.
People will 100%, if you're just, if they're asking about you and you're the one who's responding either where you won't give answers, or you're responding with like an attitude, or you're defensive, there's walls up, maybe you had some bad interactions in the past, whatever it may be, but no friendship can form there, right? Because there has to be that just exchange of information that allows people to understand one another. So friendship can form and things can deepen, and I can ask you about this and how is this and so on and so forth. So it's like if you're out there and you're thinking like, I am lonely, I do have few or no close friends, it's like that is something to consider. It's like, am I sharing with people, or have I put up, walls that are inhibiting these healthy relationships to be able to form because people have just stopped asking me. Yeah. I'm not saying anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And to understand that the deepest form of friendship and the truest form of friendship is to truly know the other person, right? And you can't know someone without getting that information or sharing it, right? David knew everything about Jonathan. Jonathan knew everything that was going on with David, while Saul, his own father, knew nothing of where he was or what was going on. Jonathan knew everything to the T, the deep things.
Saul's searching for him, can't find him at the same time that he's meeting up with Jonathan. They're having this meeting.
Yeah,
you're right.
So that's the fullest form of friendship, just completely knowing them, and that has to come through sharing.
Yeah, and then the last thing we looked at was also from John 15, where. What Jesus says here in verse 13, greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. And the Lord actually did that, right? Mm-hmm. Jesus died for us.
Mm-hmm. For God so loved the world.
Right? We talked about tonight that, you probably are not going to have the same situation where you could die for somebody. So what are we talking about here in verse 13? It's talking about just sacrifice. Mm-hmm. That if I'm going to love somebody in friendship, there's going to be some sacrifice there. Meaning, you could talk about many things with that, but it's like you think back to Genesis, not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him, right? A helper. That was the original. That's how the Lord described it. He was going to make woman for man as a helper, right? So it's like there's a lot with sacrifice where it's like, in relationship there's definitely some setting aside of self. Mm-hmm. You're confronted with your own selfishness for sure, and that also is in friendship as well. Just sacrificing for friendship, being helpful, plays big into that.
Yeah, and I think specifically for males, the biggest way I could be helpful towards someone is I'm willing to help solve their problems, right? Mm-hmm. That's probably the biggest way. Is and the only way I know that is I know what's going on, right? We're sharing info.
Right.
I'm giving you things. I'm giving you my time, my opinion. I'm showing I'm going to be steadfast to you. We're only having that because there's that foundation of match to begin with, right? So I think in its fullest form, it's like, the sacrifice is a no-brainer. I'm willing to help you out, whether it's a ride, whether it's a money situation, just spending time with each other, a word of encouragement. You have this problem, how can I do that? How can I set you up with this, that? That's the overflow of love, right? Mm-hmm. If you love someone, you'll help them. And you'll sacrifice for them without even thinking about it. It's natural.
Yeah, like tonight we were like, okay, what are concrete examples of this? And one of the guys said, a ride.
Could be simple.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Right? You're helpful, you're available.
Yeah.
And sacrifice. So we put all that together, and so you're looking for a match, you're looking for covenant, giving, sharing, sacrificing, and then we concluded that all with just the verse out of 2 Samuel, where next week we're going to talk about the death of Jonathan. And after the death of Jonathan, this is what David said, where he said in 2 Samuel 1:26, said, I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. And just that's just such a powerful verse of the insight into how deep this friendship was, and how that's what you're aspiring to in friendship. That this love was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. Everybody's been in love, everybody's felt those feelings, and we often, I think, understand that type of love more, right? Like, okay, here's relationship love, and here's my girlfriend, here's my wife. That but the friendship that he had with Jonathan, exceeded that, right? So it's like, you'll never become your David until you find your Jonathan.
Yeah.
Finding that deep friendship that's gonna, as you said earlier, just take you up another level in life.
Yeah.
Of somebody who can provide that, just encouragement and, is a match, and that there's loyalty with that, like we talked about with covenant, and somebody who's, giving and sacrificing, sharing, and it's mutual, right? This isn't a one-way street. It's mutual, but that's both going to make you great.
Yeah, and I think David he lived such a life, just from, there were many aspects, either from his career, his position, all the things he accomplished. It just shows you the deepness of this friendship with Jonathan was one of the highlights of it. And if we don't have that, we're really missing out, on what a great aspect of life. And I think if the church could figure that out, which we're called to do, if we could figure out friendship, if we can figure out that unity and that strength that comes from unity, the things that the Lord could do through that overall, I think would be really cool to see, just from a personal level, but also from a communal level, that I think the Spirit would be moving and moving vibrantly, So, those are really good applicable points on how to build friendship, how to look for it, how to nurture it, and what a great example it is from Jonathan and David to learn from.
Yeah, and I think a final point is, like the old folks used to say, if you want to make a friend,
be a friend.
Be a friend. That is really good advice. And kid a few months back that was talking to me one-on-one and just saying, he feels very lonely. He feels like he has no friends. And I told him, I was like, here's opportunities you have to make friends in your life. But you're not going to any of these things, like he had things he could be going to where he would naturally meet people and naturally make friends, but he's never consistent in going to them, so it's like there is action that has to be taken and applied for friendship. And like we said, such an important thing. And David and Jonathan, just a great example of that. So that's friendship talking out of Psalm 54, and next week, part 2 of Jonathan.